Today we are going to unearth the darkest secrets and the forbidden truths behind the Conjuring franchise. What Hollywood has hidden beneath layers of makeup is a bloody reality that will make you question the safety of your own walls. We are diving deep into the sealed files of cases that defy all logic, exposing the scars left by entities that do not die when the lights come on. Prepare yourself, because from this moment on, the cinema ends and your true nightmare begins, revealing that the truth behind these films is far more disturbing than any fiction. What I am about to tell you now proves that the real terror behind this universe is an endless abyss, where tormented souls survived the impossible. We are here to separate the movie marketing from the visceral horror that marked entire families forever, forcing you to question every creak you hear in your house. From fiction to fact, the real haunting of the Perron family. The farmhouse in Rhode Island was not a horror set built in a studio, but an ancient wooden structure that breathed the suffering of past decades. When the Perrons crossed that threshold in 1970, they didn't know they were entering a territory where time seemed to have stagnated in a perpetual and malignant agony. The air inside those walls was thick and carried a metallic odor of old blood and decaying meat, something no common cleaning product could remove. These weren't just scares planned for the cinema. It was a silent and oppressive invasion that began to erode the peace of mind of every family member one by one. Bathsheba Sherman, the entity that ruled that soil, was much more than a legend of witchcraft. She was a force of pure hatred who despised any form of life. Local accounts suggest she had sacrificed her own flesh to seal a dark pact, leaving a trail of a curse that clung to anyone who dared to inhabit her land. The persecution of Carolyn Perron was of a visceral cruelty, manifesting in inexplicable bruises and physical attacks that happened in the deadly silence of the early morning. The entity did not just want to scare the family. She desired to corrupt the role of the mother, replacing maternal love with a demonic possession aimed at the total destruction of the entire home. The children saw shadows in the dark corners and felt invisible hands pulling their feet during sleep, turning the bedroom into a true cell of psychological torture. Innocence was stolen in a few months, replaced by a gaze of constant dread that no child should ever carry, marking their souls with the fear of the invisible. The geographic isolation of the farmhouse made everything more desperate, as the cries for help were muffled by the dense and hostile woods that surrounded the entire old property. It was as if the house were in a dimension apart, where the laws of God and physics no longer had authority, leaving the parents completely at the mercy of Bathsheba. Heavy objects were thrown by invisible forces, and the sound of banging coming from inside the walls echoed throughout the dawn, preventing any chance of rest. The family's physical exhaustion was used as a tool by the entity, which attacked with more strength when they were most vulnerable, exhausted, and without any hope. Unlike what we see on the screens, the solution was not quick and far from definitive. The trauma seeped into the genetics of that family like a slow-acting and lethal poison. Even after leaving that cursed house, the shadows seemed to follow them for years, proving that certain doors, once open to hell, never truly closed. The presence of evil was so real that family members avoided certain parts of the house even during the day, for the cold that emanated from some rooms was not natural. They learned to live in a state of constant spiritual warfare, where any carelessness could result in a new violent attack from that presence claiming the matriarch's soul. To this day, the stories told by the survivors carry a burden of pain that cinema will never be able to replicate with total fidelity or respect for the suffering. What happened in Rhode Island was a psychological massacre, a demonstration that there are forces that consider our presence on their land an affront to be punished with terror. The Warrens, believers or deceivers, Ed and Lorraine Warren were no strangers to the abyss. They dedicated their entire lives to cataloging phenomena that most of humanity prefers to pretend do not exist. At the beginning of their careers, they sought to debunk frauds, but what they found in the practice of the occult changed their souls and their deepest convictions about evil forever. When they arrived at the Perron farm, Lorraine felt a psychic impact so violent that it almost physically prevented her from entering the residence charged with negative energy. She didn't just see common ghosts. She saw the complex web of malice that Bathsheba had woven around that family, a trap designed to consume innocent souls. Ed, with his vast knowledge in theology and demonology, quickly realized they were not dealing with the common spirit of a deceased person, but with something purely inhuman. The intensity of the manifestations required more than simple prayers. It demanded a spiritual war that would put their own lives at constant risk before something overwhelming. The famous seance, which in the cinema seems like a heroic climax, in real life was a chaos of inhuman screams and physical violence that nearly took Caroline's life. The matriarch's body was thrown through the air like a rag doll, while a voice that did not belong to her uttered blasphemies that froze the blood of everyone present in the room. Many critics to this day labeled the Warrens as opportunists who knew how to sell fear to an audience hungry for mystery and any kind of sensationalism. They point to inconsistencies in the reports and the lack of rigorous scientific evidence, suggesting that the couple fed the hysteria to maintain their relevance in the media and newspapers of the time. However, the testimonies of the victims the Warrens helped without charging a single cent suggest a motivation much nobler, darker, and more dangerous than fame. They lived surrounded by cursed objects in their private museum, items that vibrated with a negative energy so strong they required constant rituals of containment not to break free. The duality between the couple's fame and the real danger they faced creates a mist of mystery that will never be fully dissipated by science or official history. Were they the protectors of humanity against the occult, or just storytellers who believed their own lies? The answer depends entirely on how much you fear what lives in the dark. The Warrens' dedication was such that they transformed their own home into a sanctuary and a prison for evil, keeping secrets that few people would have the courage to hear. Lorraine frequently said that evil is like a parasite, waiting only for a moment of weakness or a doubt to infiltrate and destroy a life from the inside out. Many wonder if the Warren Museum is truly a place of protection, or if the concentration of so many cursed objects created a permanent portal to the unknown. Each artifact in there has a story of blood and despair, and the Warrens were the jailers of these energies that Hollywood now uses to entertain us on weekends. Their journey is ended, but the files they left behind continue to be an inexhaustible source of terror for new generations of investigators and the curious. Regardless of what the skeptics say, the impact they caused in the world of the paranormal is undeniable, and the shadow of their discoveries hangs over every modern horror film. Annabelle and Beyond, the true stories of the spirit. The real Annabelle does not have the deformed porcelain face we see in the movies, but the deceptively harmless and sweet appearance of a Raggedy Ann doll. This exterior innocence was the perfect camouflage for a manipulative entity that pretended to be a child's spirit to gain trust and entry into the lives of its victims. She would appear in different rooms, leave messages written on papers that didn't even exist in the house, and even manifest drops of blood on her cloth filling. The horror of Annabelle lies in the fact that evil can hide in the simplest and most beloved object, patiently waiting for the right moment to reveal its true face. The Valak case finds its roots in the Enfield Poltergeist, where an entire family in London was besieged by phenomena that defied all the logic of modern physics. Walls banged by themselves, furniture flew across the rooms, and one of the daughters spoke with a deep masculine voice that seemed to come directly from the depths of hell itself. The Crooked Man and other bizarre creatures that appear in the franchise are echoes of ancient folklore and documented manifestations in various isolated corners of the world. They represent the capacity of evil to transform into grotesque forms to break the human psyche through pure visual shock and the complete distortion of our reality. Each expansion of this cinematic universe is actually a piece of a much larger puzzle about how the supernatural manifests in different ways for each person. Cinema merely connects these traumatic dots, creating a narrative that makes us feel that no place, be it a church or a toy room, is safe. The real doll remains locked in a blessed glass box, with stern warnings that no one should dare touch or provoke it in any possible way. Reports of people who ignored these warnings and suffered fatal accidents shortly after leaving the museum serve as a reminder that some energies do not forgive disrespect. In the Enfield case, investigators from the Society for Psychical Research witnessed phenomena that could not be explained as tricks or frauds by children seeking attention. The voice coming out of young Janet was loaded with information she could not have known, revealing details about deaths that occurred in that house decades before her family moved in. These cases show that the Conjuring Universe is a patchwork of real suffering, where entertainment mixes with the trauma of those who saw the impossible. The demonic nun, Valak, may be a visual creation, but the feeling of being hunted by something sacred that has become profane is a fear that has accompanied humanity for millennia. The connection between these different cases suggests that there is an invisible network of darkness that links isolated events, as if evil is always seeking new ways to manifest. Annabelle, Valak, and the Crooked Man are just the visible faces of an ocean of horror that the Warrens tried to map during decades of dangerous investigations. The fascination with these objects and entities proves that humanity has a morbid desire to look at what scares us, perhaps in the hope of finding a way to protect ourselves. But the truth contained in the real files warns us that sometimes the best form of protection is silence and total distance from these relics of the abyss. The human cost, beyond the haunting. The impact of a real haunting does not end when the cinema lights go out or when the family finally decides to abandon the property that terrified them for so long. For the parents' life became an eternal state of vigilance and anxiety, where every crack in the wood or sudden drop in temperature brought back the dread of Rhode Island. Andrea Perron spent decades of her adult life trying to process what she saw as a child, writing volumes that serve as a cry for help and a testament to survival. The human cost is measured in sleepless nights, in fragile mental health, and in the eternal doubt of knowing if you will ever be able to live in absolute peace. Skeptics argue that extreme stress and mutual suggestion can create false memories, transforming common events into traumatic experiences of a totally supernatural character. But how do you explain when multiple people see the same entity at the same time? Or when the physical marks of a violent attack remain on the skin for several consecutive days? The true tragedy is that while the public enjoys the terror in movie theaters, the real survivors carry the weight of a truth the world prefers to ignore. They become exiles from normalcy, living in a world where safety is just a fragile illusion that can be broken at any moment by a simple whisper. The pain of not being believed is a second haunting that stalks these families, who are often ridiculed by neighbors, the press, and even their own relatives. The social isolation that follows a large-scale paranormal event can be just as destructive as the demonic entity itself that began the entire process of pain. Often, the children of these families grow up with a distorted perception of reality, expecting evil to manifest at any moment, even in safe and bright environments. The trauma becomes a cursed inheritance, passed from generation to generation through stories told in low voices and an instinctive fear of old and silent places. Rebuilding a life after an encounter with the occult requires a strength that few possess, and many end up getting lost along the way, surrendering to addiction or total isolation. What we see in the films is the struggle for physical survival, but what we don't see is the eternal struggle to recover the soul and the will to live in a world that seems hostile. Studying the human cost of these hauntings makes us look at the Conjuring franchise with different eyes, realizing that every scream on the screen echoes a real scream that happened in the past. It is not just about entertainment, but a historical record of how the inexplicable can devastate the most basic structure of a family: love and trust. The persistence of fear in the lives of these survivors is definitive proof that they encountered something that should not belong to our world, something that left a permanent mark on their consciousness. They are the watchers of the abyss, constantly reminding us that our understanding of reality is limited and dangerously incomplete before the unknown. Finally, the human cost is what gives weight and seriousness to these stories, elevating them from simple ghost tales to chronicles of resistance against the darkest of things. When we watch these films, we are, in a way, witnessing someone else's pain transformed into a spectacle, and it is our duty to remember that those people were real and their suffering was too. The enduring mystery: why are we still afraid? We continue to watch these films and seek out these stories because, in the back of our minds, we know that something exists beyond what our eyes can see or our science can explain. The fear of the invisible is humanity's oldest and most powerful fear. And the Conjuring franchise touches exactly on that open wound that never fully heals. The boundary between what is fact and what is fiction in cinema serves only to give us a little psychological comfort, but doubt is what truly keeps us awake at night. If even a small fraction of what the Warrens reported is true, the world around us is a much more dangerous and darker place than we dare admit during the day. Your perception of the world around you changes forever when you accept the possibility that the invisible can interact with the material in a violent and totally arbitrary way. The mystery surrounding this universe is not just about ghosts, but about our own fragility before forces we cannot control and cannot understand. The fascination with real terror is a way for us to prepare for the worst, testing our limits while we are protected by the safety of our screens and our brightly lit homes. But the truth contained in the real files serves as a constant warning that light may not be enough to keep certain presences away for long. As long as there are houses with dark pasts and people who report encounters with the impossible, the legacy of the Warrens and the families they helped will continue to live in our culture. Fear is a universal language, and these stories are the chronicles of how humanity desperately tries to understand what awaits us when the lights finally go out forever. If you felt the atmosphere grow heavy and want to discover more real secrets behind the greatest horror classics, be sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Leave a like if you enjoy this kind of content and if this dive into the darkness chilled your soul in a way you didn't expect. Share your opinion with us in the comments. Do you believe real evil was present on that farm, or was it all just a large collective fear? Your participation helps keep our investigations alive and brings more hidden truths to light. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Until next time, if you can sleep peacefully tonight,